How am I doing on my 50 by 50 project? It's time for a check-in. I'm working on my cold foam skills, getting better. Welcome, my name is Anne, and this is my channel, In Search of Wonder. And today I am checking in with an update on my 50 by 50 project. What is in my 50 by 50 project, you ask? I'm so glad you asked, because I'm going to tell you. Here it is, here's my journal spread. About a year and a half ago, I decided to put all of the books that I had been wanting to read that were on my eventual TBR that I knew I really wanted to read at some point, but I just hadn't gotten to them yet. I put them in this list and I gave myself a deadline, age 50. At that point in time, I had about 5.5 years to go until I turned 50. This being my birthday month, the time is winding down. I have 4 more years to finish this project. Thankfully, as I said, these books are all books that I have been wanting to read. So it's not like any of them are a dread or a chore. Some of them are a bit daunting to me for one reason or another, but most of them, I'm looking forward to reading them, and it's exciting to be able to read them and check them off the list. Also, I'm finding that very often, because these books are already on my radar and already books that I want to read, I choose them and put them in my TBR without even consciously realizing that they are in my 50-50 project. So thankfully, that means that I'm actually doing pretty well. Out of 50 books, I have read 15 in a year and a half, and I have 4 more years to go. So that means 35 books spread over 4 years. Easy peasy. Granted, some of the ones left are chunkers. So far, I think the only one that really counts as a chunker that I've read so far is The Count of Monte Cristo, which is the Mac Daddy. So that was big, okay? That was an accomplishment. It was totally worthwhile. Enjoyed it and loved it, but it was big. It was very lengthy. So that was probably the longest one on here. There are some that vie with it for length, like War and Peace. Kristin Lavransdatter is 3 volumes, and I intend to read all of them. I think the Pickwick Papers is longish, and I want to say Crime and Punishment is pretty long. East of Eden, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say that that one is longer too. So there are some chunkers left, but if I read at least one of them every year, I think we should be good. So, at least as far as that goes, I'm feeling pretty confident that I'm doing very well with my 50 by 50. So let's get a little more specific about what I've read and what I thought about it. I have this stack of books here that I have physical copies of the books that I've read, but I also have some books that I've read digitally and or I didn't hang on to them after I read them. Not because I hated them or disliked them, I just keep a pretty tight rein on my book inventory, and so if something isn't a classic that I love and I know I will read again, or I appreciate the value of it, then I won't necessarily keep it. So I get rid of books quite frequently, and I don't hang on to them once I've read them unless I really want to keep them. So it doesn't mean it was bad, just means I didn't feel the need to keep it in the limited space on my shelf. So first I'm going to go through those, and I'm not going to try to rank these because I don't have the headspace for that right now. We'll just go through them, and probably it will become apparent as we talk through them which ones I really, really enjoyed, which ones were kind of mid, and which ones sank to the bottom so far. Although I haven't had any real duds, so I haven't had any DNFs, so that's been great. To begin with, the first one I want to mention that I don't have a copy of is Flowers for Algernon, which actually was really a fantastic read. Thoroughly enjoyed that. I believe I gave it 5 stars. And that is the sort of book that really sticks with you. I do think at some point in my life, I might be interested in rereading it, but not anytime soon. So I didn't actually hang on to a copy of that one, but I did thoroughly enjoy it, and I highly recommend it. I wouldn't say, for people who are concerned about clean reads and the like, I wouldn't say that it's fully clean, but I think it was a worthwhile story, and there was great value in the story that, who is the author? The author is escaping me at the moment, but the story that the author was telling and the themes in the book are really important and were really well drawn out in the story. One of those books that doesn't go away easily. So definitely recommend. Glad that I read that one. Another one that I don't have because I read it digitally is Cecilia by Frances Burney. That one was sort of mid for me. It was long. That was my main complaint with it. It was too long. And sometimes a book's length is worth it. I have no problem with a book being long, but sometimes the length isn't needed. There were rabbit trails, there were unnecessary characters, there were whole sections, that kind of repetitive sections of our main character's life that could have been cut. It could have been much more concisely told, in my opinion. Okay, you can see I have opinions about this. Experts may disagree with me. I felt like it was too long. I felt like the same story could have been told more concisely. That's where I landed with that one. Aside from that, it was a very interesting story. I enjoyed the characters. I liked what Frances Burney was doing there with that story. I found it very interesting. I found it unique and pretty good storytelling overall. It's just too many words. She needed an editor to cut out some of them. Otherwise, it was very good. And then The Mysteries of Udolpho, which I also read. I either read it digitally or I borrowed it from the library, but that one I did enjoy. Now, that one was wordy and maybe had some passages of it that didn't need to be there, that were extra, didn't really contribute to the story overall. But all in all, I really enjoyed that one, more so than The Romance of the Forest, which was the other book that I have read by Anne Radcliffe. I loved The Mysteries of Udolpho. I particularly loved the travel writing and the nature descriptions. It was wonderful just to immerse myself in the descriptions of those surroundings and to really feel the atmosphere of that story. She's great at setting the atmosphere, top tier. And that is what I really loved about the book. The actual story itself, the characters were okay. The plot was fine. It was a little bit dramatic, maybe a little bit melodramatic at times. It was definitely intended to be suspenseful and to keep you reading to find out what was happening, and that worked. But really, just the immersive atmosphere of that story and the way Anne Radcliffe was a master at creating that atmosphere was what I loved about that story. That was the strength of it. Then we have A Woman of No Importance, which I read very recently, which was a biography about a woman whose name escapes me because I'm terrible with names. Apologies. You'll probably hear that a lot. A woman who was one of the first members of the resistance in France during World War II, although she was an American and she worked for a British agency, but it wasn't MI6. It was an agency in Britain that was started specifically to counter the effects, I guess, of the German propaganda in the, the French provisional government in France during the time of World War II, earlier on in World War II, and to kind of generate resistance to it and to kind of foment rebellion among the French to help them better resist the Germans. And so this American woman, whose name escapes me at the moment, she was brave and willing. She had a prosthetic leg, so which just adds to the immensity of what she did and the layers of courage and bravery that she had. She was one of the first ones that they put in France, and many people recognize that she was of invaluable importance in the war against Germany and its allies in World War II. I think it's not too much to say that her contributions were incalculable. How much she aided the allies against the Axis powers. And It was a very interesting read. I really enjoyed it. I think I give it maybe 4 stars, 4.5 stars. Very good. I very much admired the strength and character of this woman and all that she was able to accomplish during that time and her integrity. And it was a very interesting read. I didn't know much, if anything, about her before then, before I read the book. And I'm late to the party. A lot of people have read the book. I'm glad that I finally did. One other book that I don't have a physical copy of anymore is the only one so far that I would have to say was not my favorite read. And that is Pamela by Samuel Richardson. I always mix him up with Samuel Johnson. Samuel Richardson. And Pamela was... The story itself was problematic in certain ways. And the storytelling was awkward. I see what Samuel Richardson was trying to do, and I appreciate it. There were aspects of the story that I enjoyed. I loved that it was epistolary. That contributed to some of the awkwardness, although I have to say. I understand what he was doing with some of the directions that the story took, and they weren't as problematic for me as they were for other people. But at the same time, it's not the sort of book that I would sit down and just read for fun. I'm glad I read it. I'll never read it again. Didn't keep it on my shelf. I don't recommend it unless you are interested in it for the same reasons that I was, which was that this was an author that Jane Austen read and enjoyed. So I wanted to read his books. I still want to read his other books. This was a very influential early English novel that is commonly referenced in subsequent novels in the English language. It was immensely popular in its day. It was a bestseller. It had merch. Like, it was a big deal. So I wanted to find out what were those people in the 1700s loving about this book. I didn't really figure that out, but I'm glad I read it. And I guess I don't really understand the people in the 1700s, but I'm glad I read it. So, on to the books that I have hard copies of, and my thoughts on those. I'm just going to go through the stack. So, The Epic of Gilgamesh. This was one I read for interest's sake, for academic purposes, if you will, for the improvement of my mind. Because it is an ancient story, and ancient literature and ancient history, not really my thing, but at the same time, I recognize up here, if not here, the importance of it. So I read it. It's one of the oldest stories in all of history, let alone Western history. So that in and of itself, like aside from the Bible, right, that in itself is interesting. And I found it very easy to read. I found it fascinating. I loved the way that the ancient cultures all have echoes of the biblical story. Now, they've sadly been distorted and twisted, but it was neat to see that those stories remain in some form or fashion and have been shared down through generations. Anyway, it was very interesting to read. It's not like a book you sit down and read for fun. At least not, I don't. I'm not on that level. And then I loved this one. This is Evangeline by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And Cheryl at Candlewick Library and I read this together, and we both loved it. Oh my goodness. I haven't read a lot of long form poetry, but this was amazing. And this would be a great one to read this year, the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, because it's like a tour de force of the American landscape at the cusp of America becoming a country. And you get to see the Acadia area and then they go to Philadelphia, I believe, and then they go out west, and they're in Michigan, I think. They just cover a lot of ground in this story in early America, and it's just so beautifully told. That was my favorite part. Gorgeous, gorgeous writing that sets the scene, the nature writing. I could picture in my mind's eye the settings that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was described. Oh, I think they even go down to like Louisiana, because I seem to recall like descriptions of the bayou, and it was so wonderful. Really enjoyed this. This is one of my favorites that I've read from this project so far. Another one I read for the sake of my mind, and that is the Oedipus plays of Sophocles. I had read at least one of these in high school. I may have read all of them. I don't know. If I had, I blocked the first two out of my mind. I did remember the third one, the one about Antigone. Oedipus the King, I didn't remember, and that was an interesting read for sure. There's a lot going on in that story, but I'm glad I read it, because I think that Greek drama is foundational to a lot of Western culture and Western literature and Western music. So it was a foundational piece of literary work. So I read it, and I'm glad I read it. In a totally different vein, Kelly, at Bookish Kelly, she and I, buddy, read The Hour That Changes the World earlier this year. And this is about dedicating an hour of prayer every day, and kind of practical ways to do that, and insight, maybe like a method that you can follow, specific things that you can pray through over the course of that hour. And I felt like there were a lot of great ideas in here, and there was a lot of good guidance on prayer and examples of how to do it. And it's a little bit thinking outside the box and a very creative approach to prayer, not just a rote list of, dear God, give me this, give me that, I need this, I need that, sort of thing. So it was very good in that respect. I did not agree with the author on some of the points that he made. Every couple chapters, both Kelly and I would be like, well, there was this one thing that, I didn't agree with where he was going with that one, but there was a lot of other stuff in it that we gleaned from it that was really good and very helpful. So it was a bit of a mixed bag, but overall, I did find it very helpful and instructive in my prayer life, and I gained a lot from it. Along a similar line, but much better for me personally, was The Practice of the Presence of God that I read earlier this year by Brother Lawrence. And I already read this one with Madeline, and it was very, very good. This one was impactful and life-changing, honestly. And I am so glad I read it. It has definitely influenced my walk with the Lord this year. I have not achieved the level of oneness with God that Brother Lawrence had achieved, but again, he had decades of practice. Also, he was a monk, so he had a lot of time to work on that. I have learned where my failings are, for sure, definitely. I have learned that it is impossible to have this constant oneness fellowship with God, this being in the presence of God, when you have sinful attitudes in your heart. That's like one of the first things that just became obvious to me. So anytime I want to harbor a bad attitude or a critical thought or judgmental spirit or complaining attitude, yeah, it's pretty much impossible to be in God's presence with that in your heart and mind. And that consumes you. That negativity consumes you and does not allow room for any light in there at all. So I've learned that. Haven't overcome it, but I've learned it. So that was very good, very life-changing. I think this is a good book to read on an annual basis. Honestly, Brother Lawrence's advice was just so fresh and practical and inspirational and doable by anyone. Highly recommend. Totally different vein. Once again, I'm just going through my stack the way it's lined up. I did not organize these in any way, which is probably kind of silly of me because we're kind of going all over the place here, but I read Dracula. And Dracula was a year ago or so that I read this one, and oh my goodness, I loved this book. Not a vampire girly at all. I had never read a vampire story in my life. I'm not sure if any of them will compare to this one. So far, I've read one or two others, and they haven't come close. Dracula, so good. I loved it. I loved everything Bram Stoker was doing in this book. Enjoyed it thoroughly. Highly recommend. Kept me on the edge of my seat. It was suspenseful. It was dramatic. It was a wonderful read. Now, I will say, I did get the sense as I was reading it, I'm not sure all of that would hold up on a second read through. I think there are some ways in which it might fall apart a little bit and not have the same weight and power on a subsequent read. At some point, however, I do think I will reread it and see. I'm going to give it some time. Another one that packed a punch and actually is in a similar vein to that, and that is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This one I buddy read with Faith at Faith in Books, and we both just really loved it. I had some great conversations about it. This is a short book, but it's punchy. Like it'll punch you in the gut. There's so much that Robert Louis Stevenson is doing here in this story, and I think everyone should read it, and it won't take much of your time. And when it starts out, you're like, okay, I know something about the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. What are we doing here? Like, who are these people? Like, what are they talking about? It starts so innocuously. And then you get to the real story. And then it's honestly a little shocking. But very good. And then this represents the next book that I read. This is just a little book about William Shakespeare, his life, and some synopses of his famous plays. This is representing Othello, which I read. I have quite a few, five, I guess. I think I did one for each year. Shakespeare on my list. I have read a lot of his comedies, but I have not read much in the way of tragedies or histories by Shakespeare. And those are the ones that I put on this list to kind of like nudge me to read those. So I read Othello and I really loved it. I had a false start with it. I didn't love it when I first started it. But as I picked it back up and just determined to read it, I really enjoyed it. I particularly loved how Shakespeare drew the character of Iago, because he was one of the best villains I've ever read. Like, that was just masterfully done by Shakespeare. Just masterfully done. I do feel like Shakespeare recycles a lot of ideas and themes and storylines in his books, in his plays, and I feel like there's some recycled elements in that one that I kind of think maybe were done better in other plays, but overall, it was Iago. Iago pulls that play together and gives it the punch that it has and makes it one of his masterpieces. Speaking of masterpieces, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I was blown away. Like, I'm a Charles Dickens girly, okay? I like Charles Dickens. Some people don't like how wordy he is. And you know, I was talking about Frances Burney and her wordiness over there. He uses words to effect. Like, he has a lot of words, but he's doing something with them. He's not just yammering. If you slow down and you read his words, there's so much richness. I'm a word girl, I admit it. I love words, I love language, I love playing with language. I love everything about it. But this one's different. I feel like Dickens was inspired with this one and in a bit of a different way. And it was epic and powerful and impactful and brought me to tears. And this was an amazing story. A Tale of Two Cities. Definitely my favorite Charles Dickens. I don't know why it took me so long to read it. I was a little bit scared of it because I'd heard that it could be difficult to understand. I didn't think so. I thought it was an incredible and impactful story and powerfully told. And I just loved it. And finally, the chunker that I read, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. And I really enjoyed my time with this one as well. I was a little bit surprised at some of the content in this book. Although I shouldn't have been, French authors aren't necessarily the same as English authors, which I know. They had kind of a different idea of morality and propriety and all of that. but it was still very, very good. Kept me on the edge of my seat, even though it spans 30, 40 years in a man's life, or close to that. Maybe not that, maybe 20 years. I don't know. It's a long time. And it is a tale of vengeance, which isn't my usual fare either. There's a lot of seafaring going on. Again, not my usual fare. It very much centers around a male protagonist. Again, not my usual. I loved it. I loved it. So many characters. I had to print out a character map, which, warning, by necessity, there are some spoilers in a character map. So, you know, you have to pick and choose what's worse. You're getting lost in all the characters, or getting hints of what's going to come by noticing the connections between the different characters. But it was great. It was wonderful. And my husband and I have started watching the most recent adaptation of it, but we've only seen the first 2 episodes, so we need to finish watching that, but really enjoyed that one. So those are the books that I have read on my 50 by 50. I have 35 to go. So I'm going to go through, I've already told you the chunkers that I have on my list, but there are some other categories that I put in here, and I'm going to tell you what all they are. I'm going to mention ones that I'm thinking of reading this year for one reason or another. I'm going to mention ones that I've put off and just haven't read for whatever reason. And I want you to tell me which ones I should prioritize and which ones that I should pick up and read first of these. As I said, I already mentioned the chunkers. Don't need to go over those again, but I will say I had 5 Dickens on here, and I've read 1. So I need to read 1 Dickens a year. The Dickens that I have left are the Pickwick Papers, The Old Curiosity Shop, Martin Chuzzlewit, and Our Mutual Friend. I'm leaning towards The Old Curiosity Shop or Our Mutual Friend as my next Dickens read, but I may pick up one of those for October, but I may wait till next year to pick up my next Dickens. We'll see. And then I do need to pick up one of these Shakespeares. I originally had 5, so I have 4 Shakespeares left. So I need to read one this year because Othello was last year. Hamlet, MacBeth, Antony and Cleopatra, and Julius Caesar. So if you have a recommendation of which one of those I should read first, I think I have hard copies of all of them that are annotated. So I think I can read any of them this year. Any suggestions? I am focusing on American authors, and this is an American author that I want to read, John Steinbeck, and East of Eden is one that comes most highly recommended. So I kind of want to get to that this year. I think it's a bit of a chunker, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have a hard copy, but I would like to read that. One that I also should read this year, but honestly, frankly, it doesn't interest me, and that is As I Lay Dying by Faulkner, I believe. I don't know. I don't get on well with modern American authors, but, you know, some of them I feel like I need to read as an American who is interested in literature. And then these are some classics that I am, oh, well, let me go ahead. There are some other American authors that I really want to try. Flannery O'Connor, Everything That Rises Must Converge. And that's short stories. That's a short story collection. I think I probably will like Flannery O'Connor to a certain extent. At least, I think of it this way, at least cerebrally. Like, I may not love the stories or the characters of the storytelling, but I think her writing could be something that I could appreciate. So there's that. And then The Yellow Wallpaper, which I'm just curious about, frankly, honestly. And I just want to satisfy my curiosity about that one. So those are the other American authors, classic authors that I really want to try. So I should get to those this year. I should prioritize them. Oh, I forgot 2. O Pioneers and My Antonia by Willa Cather. And one or the other of those I will read, if nothing else, for my Prairie Trail Readathon in August, which I'm definitely planning at this point to do again. And I've been kind of mentally earmarking those for that purpose. So I would love to read one of those or both of them in August this year. American authors. Okay. Dr. Thorne by Anthony Trollope. I want to read Anthony Trollope. I've wanted to read Anthony Trollope for years. I haven't yet. Why? I don't know. Dr. Thorne I put on here because I watched an adaptation and really enjoyed it. And I've heard, a lot of people really like it. And it's a good entry into Anthony Trollope. But I believe it's the second in a series, which irritates me. I think I need to read the first one first. So, does it matter? If you have read them, let me know. Is it really that important, or can I start with Dr. Thorne? And then Lady Audley's Secret, which I do have a copy of. And I read a book by that author, not last October, but the October before. And I did enjoy it. It was a fun read. And so I think I will really like Lady Audley's Secret. I just haven't made time for it. And then Chekhov. He has a collection of short stories, The Seagull, and like Seagull and other short stories. I've read some Chekhov already and enjoyed it. Sometimes he's a little too bleak for me, but some of his I've really liked as well. But I just want to read a full collection of his short stories rather than just, random odds and ends, which so far is all I've done. And this one, I know this is shocking that I've never read this yet, but I want to read The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. Not a fantasy girl. But at the same time, I know that The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy are essential reads for readers and lovers of classic literature, so I need to read them eventually, and I want to start with The Hobbit. I'm sure I will love it. I'm sure I will love it, regardless of whether or not I like fantasy. I'm sure I will love it. The whole fantasy thing just doesn't interest me very much, so I haven't yet. Then Waverley, which is by Sir Walter Scott, I think. Yes? No, I'm second guessing myself, but I think that he's the author of that one. I just want to read anything by him. I read one book by him many years ago, loved it, want to read more. I just haven't. So I put one on the list to kind of give me that nudge. I guess this next one would kind of fall into the category of American authors, although I think he was partially British as well. And that is The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. I've read short stories and a short story and a novella by him, but I've not read The Portrait of a Lady. So I really do want to read that one. And A Brave New World, I also want to read. And I have it on my shelf, so I can read that anytime. And then some more recent books. I have Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, which I have almost read on many an occasion. I've read the first portion of it, but I've never finished it. And then Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger, I believe, and The Book Thief by Martin Zusak. Heard amazing things about all of them. I just haven't taken the time to read them, and I really want to. Then I have some nonfiction that I want to mention very quickly. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which I have on my shelf. The subject has interested me for a really long time, ever since the book came out. And I think one of my sisters read it and said it was really good. So I don't know why I haven't read it. The Body Keeps the Score. I was traumatized, ironically, by some of the things in the introduction. And so I haven't picked it back up again. And I want to read it, but I haven't. And I'm a little scared to pick it back up again, honestly. But I have heard that once you get past the introduction and the groundwork that he lays for what he's going to be talking about, then it gets more, I don't know, clinical maybe, and not so much like examples of trauma that people have gone through, which was the part that was like my experience, secondhand trauma, reading about these people's trauma, which is terrible. Thankfully, I have never really had similar traumatic experiences in my life. I'm very grateful for that, but it was hard to read about. And then we have The Madness of Crowds, which is not the original Madness of Crowds. It's kind of like, so the original Madness of Crowds I have read, which is about how crowds can get, how people, groups of people can get caught up in a certain kind of groupthink that is completely illogical. But they're caught in it and they're convinced of it, of the truth of it. And then only the passing of time and hindsight gives the clarity that, oh, well, that was really dumb. Why did we all do that? We don't know. And actually, I'm not sure that the people involved in it ever really recognize the insanity of what they did. Think, for example, of the Salem witch trials, stuff like that. So the Madness of Crowds is about that. This particular one I'm talking about is a more recent book written within the past decade or so, and it's talking about gender, race, and identity. And you can just imagine where it goes from there, talking about those topics and current epidemics of groupthink and thought surrounding those issues that are just honestly completely illogical and unsupportable. Insupportable, I think, is probably the word I'm looking for. Anyway, so that is on my list, and I would like to read that. Some other nonfiction, these some Christian nonfiction. I have the complete works of E.M. Bounds, which I don't necessarily need to read the whole book. I think there are 8 books in that bind up. That's a lot. I don't necessarily need to read all of them, but I kind of want to read 1 or 2 of them a year as we go through the rest of this year, so I can, a long time ago I had read the first one in that book, in that bind up, and then recently I have read 1 other book in the bind up, so I think there's like 6 or so to go. So I should read another one this year in that. And then we have The Calvary Road by Roy Hession, which is like a Christian classic, and it's not a very long one, but I've picked it up once or twice, but not gotten very far in it, so I would like to read the whole thing. And then The Normal Christian Life as well. I have it on my shelf. I have a lot of Christian nonfiction on my shelf. I just need to get busy reading them. And then finally, I have a book on mythology. I don't remember the author that I want to read. I read a children's or middle grade YA nonfiction Greek mythology book that kind of explained all of the Greek myths earlier this year, and that was very helpful. But I just want a stronger foundation in that, again, because I feel like it's foundational to Western culture and Western literature, and it pervades a lot of storytelling of all kinds. So I want to get to that one at some point as well. And there's one I didn't mention yet. That is How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. That is a nonfiction, and that one's definitely going on my list this year. In fact, pardon me, editing in here. When I filmed this video, I had not yet filmed and uploaded my announcement about the reading challenge to read How to Read a Book in June this year. But I since have recorded it and uploaded it. So, yeah, go watch that video. I'll put a link to it in the cards. And now back to this video. So that's my 50 by 50. How it started, how it's going, what I have left. Let me know in the comments. If there are any of the books that I mentioned that I have left yet to read that you would like to buddy read with me, let me know, especially the ones that I said I'm planning to get to this year, and we can make some definite plans about it. If I didn't specifically say that I want to get to it this year, I might not get to it for another year or 2. So, but at the very least, we can say, hey, that would be fun to read together. So let me know in the comments if there are any that you want to buddy read with me. And if you think there are any that I should prioritize over the others. If you say, hey, I think you should start with this one, particularly the Shakespeare or the Dickens, if you have a recommendation, or any of them, and you think that I should read them. The American authors, which one should I prioritize? Let me know in the comments. And also, I'm curious, I know so many of my friends were doing a similar thing, 40 by 40, 30 by 30, etc., etc. If you did one, how's it going? Let me know. And if you haven't yet, what are some of the books that you would put on your list? And how long would you give yourself to read them? And thanks for watching. Thanks for chatting with me. And I look forward to seeing you next time.